Thanks for joining all. This topic is about the DevOps for databases, how the DevOps principles can be adopted to the databases in terms of um, managing the databases in automated way and deploying the databases changes in automated way. So let's see. So the agenda for today's topic is the DevOps. What is it? DevOps model and sample CI/CD pipelines, DevOps tools. What kind of tools that a DBA must know in order to implement the DevOps model for the databases? Where does DBA sit in DevOps environment? And we are going to see two parts. One is database provisioning, and also managing database changes. Okay, so what is DevOps? DevOps is basically regularly rapid, reliable, and controlled delivery of working software systems into the production. A combination of configuration management and release management, and as well as operations. It's a culture or a philosophy rather than a technology. So in order to make a DevOps successful, automation is key. DevOps continuous model works this way. It's full software development lifecycle in an automated way. It's plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, and operate into the production. So there are separate categories of it, like plan, code, build comes under continuous integration, wherein continuous delivery will be called plan, code, build, test, and release. And you're continually deploying until from plan right to deploy model. That's a continuous deployment, and you want to operate it without any manual intervention, anything. That's a continuous operation. So ideally, in the DevOps world, when you want to do something, when you want to change something, when you want to deploy something, when you want to create something, code planning and the coding is important thing, and then you have to build that, test it on automated way, and then release that to a different stage server, test server, EATs, and then deploy that to the production. What is a continuous integration? In agile practices, continuous integration management, and as well as testing. So continuous integration is a practice of constantly merging development work with master or main branch, so that the changes can push it along with other changes. So it's basically you are continuously developing and then continuously merging that particular piece of code to your mainstream so that you are ready to deploy. So continuous delivery is a delivery of code to environment once the developer feels the code is ready to ship. So once you've done your master trunk or master line, deliver that to your respective environment wherever you required. So this is basically a piece of automation code that comes with your pipelines and then automation code required to do the continuous delivery and as well as deploy to the production. So it's a combination of strategy rather than basically a technology that basically using. It's a strategy. It's more or less a strategy. So this is how it works. When a local environment is been, developers run in their local environment and then code commit has been done in the repositories, it sends to your continuous integration server, which is called an integration environment. And then it goes to your staging and test and development and then publish to your production. So if there is anything got failed, it go back and then roll back the changes and it push back to development. So ideally, this everything works well for development life cycle, especially in the developer running a code, you're writing changes, test that, because everything, whatever you're writing, everything is static. Basis, it's a difference. Automation is everything, source control everything, strict adherence of the process makes this entire process streamlined into a flow rather than a piece of manual stuff we do. So if we take this for the operations or the deployments or the small release, two major things called release regression management. So in DevOps terminology, if the developers are releasing small chunks of releases into the environments, which calls continuous releases. So DevOps writes their code and push that into a 2ST or 8 environment automated way. When it comes to the ops, major things that ops operation teams like system admin, DBAs, network admins, so they have to manage their servers, create the servers, monitoring, set up the monitoring, everything. Everything is automated, infrastructure as a code, and then it's part of their configuration management. They go side by side and then build the servers, hand over those servers to the development teams, they deploy the releases, test the releases, etc. But where does the when they ask, isn't it? So how, let's see, to that, let's is a role for you. I mean, in that are what you basically are doing. DBA building a databases, managing infrastructure bases, or just deploy the production changes. Or you're working with teams, develop and deploy the database script procedures, T-SQL, any other thing, manage the database migrations yourself. So you're sitting here or you're sitting in the configuration management. So it depends largely how you have to learn this DevOps philosophy or the tech culture to adopt what you need to learn basically. Let's see. So what you need, if you are in the code DBA side, you may need infrastructure as a code. That means you want to create databases in automated way, refresh databases in automated way, manage databases in automated way. Developer part, source control the database changes, automate deploy database changes, source control the data. So what all you need is a bunch of scripts, either the case. You need scripts here, you need scripts here. Integrate that, push that scripts everything to a source control, that Git repository or a common area where you can version control it, that to test systems, deploy that script to integration servers and then test it. Once the test is successful, copy those artifacts to us again back and then build and refresh. So this is how a common DevOps model works. So we can adopt that same principles based on what actually you're doing. If you're doing an infrastructure piece, like managing your database, creating, upgrading, so it's pretty much simple. You just maintain that script in source control. If you're managing source control, the code automatically, the data is the part of the thing that you have. So what are the tools that you may need to use in order to deploy or in order to learn or in order to implement the DevOps for your databases, especially in an environment that there is no DevOps culture has been there, so you want to use that. So if you take the categories of stages of the DevOps thing, plan, code, build and test, deploy, operate and monitor. Plan and code, you may have to use source control, Git or Subversion or Confluence or any other thing, so that entire of your code will be version control, source control, and keep that. And when you are building, you may need to use Maven and Gradle, these kind of tools to build and then test with JUnit, dbdiff, with SE, then push them to the integration servers using integration tool or an integration tool called, and then you can deploy that by using either Puppet, Chef, Salt, and then operate it, monitor your Zynga, New Relic, and all. So these are all new tools, or maybe data or someone had not looked into it. This is already an emerged world working on towards culture for the databases as well. Like Nagios or a Zynga, you may already have known about it. Zynga, you may not have known about it. If you are working more into the environment, you may already know about and Gradle those stuff. But integrate all these tools, we may need to use these tools in order to work and implement the DevOps culture. So this is what our sample pipeline look like. This is what my environment look like. This model pipeline consists of an integration environment and test, pre-production and production. If you look at this closely, this contains the main piece of information called for infrastructure and then broker servers, our live chat servers, and basically etc until web apps, and it does the smoke test, deploy the workflow. Every component of entire our website is staying here. If you look at this, so what we basically do is we do infrastructure as a code scripts. Because we are in AWS, we do that. So middleware components like our PeopleSoft applications, web applications, our portal and everything, and also the application components. We also built an automation testing and integrate all together in one particular Jenkins pipeline, what we call as a Jenkins pipeline. This pipeline does one thing. Whenever developers done a web code change or monitoring change or a configuration change with anything with the LDAP groups by system admin, any three changes occurs, and then the commit to our source control system called Bitbucket. The source control will be pulled by Jenkins server. So there will be a requester job looks into the source control happen. If so, it picks that automatically start integration environment. So these three integration changes and they'll adapt from a web change go to web. And once it is successful, ST9 in same LDAP and everything, and restarts and then pre-it automatically. So once it is successful here, now we determine whether it need to be not manually. So this is how it's development life cycle. Basically, any change happens in the developer world, it happens this way. But where is the database here? I can't see any. We don't have anything called a database as a part of this stack here. It's a shared resource by among everything. So in order to keep the database also as a part of this pipeline, what I need to do? First of all, if I want to keep the database deployments also into my pipeline, what I need basically. So what they're asking basically is that they are asking about database provisioning, configuration, refresh, etc. Like a parameter change should be deployed automatically, like a table space or a data file should be added automatically to all of the servers, or a new database creation or a new refresh of a database. Is that the configuration of a kind of a core DB work they're asking, or a database changes, like a new structure has been added to a table, a structure is modified, a new table has been created, or a new process has been created? Is that the things they're asking, or the provision refresh they're asking? So we need to first what is mean by database. If we determine, then it is easy for us to build something in an automated way and put that in a pipeline. Okay, let's look at as a part DevOps for database config managing database. So majority of us, when we want a database, what we'll do? We may have it already in our organizations, or other way we already have an automating or data. Just keep that automation more generic and parameterized. Build all the script and install that database well. Ensure your stuff it right from to adding to the monitoring tools. The reason is script should be able to create the database, add that to monitoring tools, backup scripts and everything, and provisioning of a database. Let's see. So our sample project look like in our Jenkins project create. I select what is, whether it's kill my and give the database name and host. Then it calls our source repository, target server. It's start cop scripts and the software. Bunch of scripts can be anything. You write that in Python. You write that anything. It can. It just repository. Are never be required. That's a simple part of thing we are doing. A bunch of scripts, maintenance scripts, add for backups, add the database to monitor contains in one bunch of script. Then it builds my database. Bunch of scripts will be either formation or my AWS Azure resource templates scripting. So now they are asking, okay, create automated. Now let's refresh the data. Refresh of your database means your database, but with an automated way. Your database, either RMN, full dump, Postgres dump, etc., etc. How you're going to do that? You just run manually, or you have already a script for that to do copying and everything. Just put that source, control it. So once we created a Jenkins project database refresh. Source database, whether I need to take a backup before the data. Then it just scripts that what I'm saying. It goes to and take a backup relevant server and copy the and then database. Get into source DB commands, copy backups to target, get into target database host. The refresh, you may need to consider physics from the production. We already halfway through. I mean, majority of us having these automations just to make them source control, ensure that is parameterized, the scripts are properly parameterized, run them as an from a scheduling tool. Now forward, create database automatically along. What is mean by stack? This of app, web, batch, data, etc. This is a fully automated or cloud or hybrid environment. Like I say, look at my source master and then say account, I want this account or something, and then give my stack name and everything. What database I want app, web, batch, monitor, or DB, or broker, LDAP. So I'll select the respective stack list. And then if I want to refresh it from the database as well, and the production database, refresh that and then just build it. So this is how it looks like in a simple way. But when we look at back, each of the stack app, right from baking the whole image of the server, and as well as configuring it, and as well as keeping the app server until the latest release, that include batch, web, monitoring tools, database, everything included one particular version of the same thing. So this requires an enormous effort of keeping your automations in sync, your source controls in sync, and everything. So this is all the strategy, the planning, and everything. So we may learn a lot of things. We have learned a lot of things in implementing all this, but we finally stood in this position that we can build our stack in a single click provision with entire configuration done with all the tools that I have mentioned earlier. So in the part two of the DevOps for databases, that's all the story of the infrastructure as a code or for a core DBA stuff, which we may already know about it. This is the interesting part, managing database deployments. I'll stop here for 1 minute and see if anyone have any questions. Now the slides are changing. Is anyone have problem?
I can see the slides changing to DevOps for databases, and then I back to Apache you see, then now part number 2.
Yeah. So I don't know, but now it's fine.
It's supposed to be showing DevOps for database part 2, managing database deployments.
Yes, correct. That's fine then. Okay.
Yes, if anyone have any issues, please reload the browser, then they will show the proper page.
Okay. So DevOps for better databases, deployments or changes. Why are they so hard? For databases, it's unique to the databases. Some properties are unique to it. So differentiate it other components like the DevOps ecosystem. So database is more than just an SQL script. It has a stable structure, code, language, written in procedures, configuration, and dependencies between objects. Database is a central resource used by several developers or several systems. Deploying database change is not as simple as copying and replacing old binaries in application stack. Database deployments is the transformation from version A to version B while keeping the business data and transforming it into the new structure. This is very, very hard to do. Like a version A contains 4 columns, wherein version B contains 3 columns. What the extra column should be do in version B? How should we remove that? This is what the most challenging part of the database deployments in the database DevOps. Database codes exist in any database or can be modified directly in any environment. This is like unlike other components where everything starts from a clean workspace in the build server. So generally, what happens is basically when you really build a server like application or a web batch server, you start from scratch and then configuration everything. But when it comes to the database, it's a completely different. It's against the flow. Let's see. So some nodes are not, someone has changed something, our script was failed, our version control has not the latest script. So it's a lot of time happen. So there are different cases as well, and we also know about it. So let's see why they are so hard even. Generally, the development lifecycle starts from development and ends in production. But what happens in databases is basically we build the database or refresh the database from production, and developers build a new version on top of it. This is against to the cycle. We build the database or refresh from the production to the development. So that's why what about the data? What about the structures? Are they going to build it from the version that what the production has? So these is all need to be discussed before we start implementing those database deployments in a DevOps lifecycle. Even though we build a database from scratch and refactor the database for big databases, it will delay the whole deployment stack. For example, I have a 300 GB of database and I will build it from scratch, like an empty database I created, and then start applying all the changes one after another, all the create table scripts and everything. How much time does it take? And insert that whole bunch of SQL statements. And entire stack will be waiting to get this database deployed. So that's not an ideal scenario. Even though we do the refactoring, somehow we managed it very quickly. How we put the data? So these are all need to be considered before we do that. So we need to have a very clear defined strategy of refreshing and refactoring the databases in a DevOps model. So these are the common challenges that we have, like version control. It's like version control and against to the flow. Complexity as such, it's a shared resource. And version controlling the data, volume and transactional data. Do you really need it? Ask your teams. Do you really need the transactional data? So let's say someone said, okay, forget about the data. Let's version control everything, like the structures, data dictionary, model, installation scripts, migration scripts, etc., etc. And what they ask is, let's reverse engineer, put all the scripts in the source control. Think twice. How about the systems? PeopleSoft, SAP, enterprise business suites, enterprise type databases, which have thousands of structures like this. So I have 17,000 views, 23,000 tables. This is a PeopleSoft database. How you're going to reverse engineering this and manage all the scripts in this one? So in an ideal world, if the database is a custom database having small structures of tables or small number of views or functions or any packages that is happen, that will actually suits not this type of databases. How do you source control all these views? We can do that one time reverse engineering. Okay, agreed. But do you really think that managing this in a plain source control like a Bitbucket and do all these changes? No. PeopleSoft has its own change management tool or a data mover or an Apple configuration tool. So that can be go in that way, not this way. So that tools are devoted. What database you are keeping for version control? Of course, we can reverse engineer the existing schema and reference, but how version control the data, mapping of databases right from version of application as well. Do we really need to bother about the transaction data for test cases or debugging cases when they need this transactional data? So only for specific test cases or something, not all time. But yes, reference data like master data, config data should be in source control at least. Sample data at least for test cases for function there. So ideally, how to do it? Again, there is no single tool of version control your data. You need to understand the data first. What data is a config data? What is a transactional data? Then what we did is basically, whenever the database change is deployed, we took a backup of a database, very hard way, at least the schema. Don't laugh, please, because we are on AWS and we can take a snapshot quicker than a normal backup. So whatever we do, whenever there is a major changes happens, we take the database backup and tag that in our source control saying that this is the version of a database at the version of the application, and then update our master version file saying that what is the version and what is the DB version. So we maintain both of them. And then once we call our deployment script, our Chef server will send those versions to be deployed like this. App 1.0 contain a baseline. App 2.0 contain DB 1.0, 3.0 DB. Ideally, this 1.0 is a snapshot of our database, which deployed not the scripts, because we are talking about the PeopleSoft here, or the 300 gigs or 500 gigs or 1 terabytes of database here. It cannot deploy a single scripts for that and then build from a scratch PeopleSoft database, and then that's not a feasible solution here. So we need to understand whether we have to do a scratch vanilla database and then deploy all the scripts database changes, or maintain your backups and source control those backups to your app version. Which one is quicker for you? That matters. Must have requirements for database changes in DevOps environment. With unique properties in mind, there are several challenges that must be addressed when managing database changes. So general principles of this: ensure all database code is covered. Ensure the database version control repository can act as single source of truth. Ensure the deployment script being executed is aware of the environment status when the script is executing. Ensure the deployment script handle conflicts and merges them. Generate a deployment script for only relevant changes, not for all the changes that what it has. Ensure the deployment script is aware of the database dependencies. Who is going to do all this? Developers or DBAs? That's the question here. If your role is a part of database changes, you must ensure that this need to be maintained. If your role is a DBA, then developer has to own all this and ensure this is all matched if they wanted DevOps deployed into the database area as well. Otherwise, one or other way will be failing. Ensure your source control data if required. This is what the hardest part is, which I already told. But generally, when you do the database migrations or deployments, either we maintain the SQL scripts, manage the change logs, or compare and sync tools. But none of them have a full understanding of these principles. I mean, they met the full principles. So we may end up with multiple tools either in a half year or through the migrations. Hence, the database deployments are always left behind from the CI/CD pipelines. That's why either we refresh from the databases or from the production database and then build the new version on top of it. So that's how generally happens. But if we understand, if we can manage all this and ensure this can be done, then it is fine. But none of the tools so far have covered all of these things. So let's see what tools we have, what kind of tools we can use in database migrations and all. Let's check what could be guidelines for support for multiple databases, multiple schemas, not only single schema. Support for multiple database technologies like Oracle, SQL, MySQL, all relational databases, in fact, because it's a migration tool for each and every database technology, and your stack or your tool set will become more, right? Huge. You have to maintain all the tools, softwares, licenses, and everything. Support for rollback changes in case of defects. When a script is failed, it automatically has to be rolled back, either in your script or your tool has to do it. Support for version controlling the SQL rather than depending on other source control. This is what the major part. When you are actually running a multi-developer environments or multi-user environments, you have to maintain that entire scripts in one of the source control. None of the tools have this skills maintained as a source control with them because it's not shared. It's deployed in one server and then everyone has to access that. But source control need to be done. Support for version controlling database code, that is procedural code. Some of the famous tools, popular tools missing this. Your PIL SQL, T-SQL, or any other procedural code is not version controlled. Only the table structures and everything. So we must know there is a procedures, functions, triggers, PL skills, everything there. Support for baselining versions, compare and sync. We must also need to compare and then sync rather than deploy and then roll back. Support for sample and reference data. That is, ability to point to right version of data to the right version of database baseline code. So if we don't maintain this sample and reference data, we have to refresh the databases from production. If you maintain this, at least the stacks and the deployments will be easy, so that from the beginning, we must know, or we must ask the developers, what is the sample and reference data along with the baseline of our database code. So migration types, this is the matrix from the previous version. So also, along with the plain SQL migrations, lot of developers willing to do the XMLs and the Java migrations and repeatable migrations. And someone wants to do an executions through command line. And majority of the cases, people want to do it from a Maven or Ant or something rather than doing in command line. So we also need to understand what kind of parser abilities it have, like procedural languages and multiple databases. Some of other features, if may required, that would also be helpful. So these are all the tools that are available in the market, more than this, but the famous tools it has. Some of them are commercial tools, some of them are the open source tools. And if you look at the Google trends from the popularity wise, I have compared with the open source and the commercial tools, the popularity. But of course, the popularity does not give you the end-to-end requirement, but just an understanding of what tool is popular in terms of search and in terms of interest over the period. So I found that Flyway and Liquibase have a larger base community or MyBatis. In fact, MyBatis is more than anything. In fact, is open source tool, but I cannot comment on the commercial tools. But if I look at the Liquibase and the Flyway and MyBatis are the equal, have a lot of interest growing from the previous years. So database migration standard approach, how we do it. Each developer should have their own database. So someone can ask me that how we can procure licenses for that. So what licenses you want? Like if a developer licenses Oracle Express Edition is fine for each and every desktop of the developer's machine. So that would be an ideal situation so that they can take the source control, create their own local DB, change it, put back to the source control, and or Jenkins server can pull that, or integration server can pull that and apply to the integration database. So each developer has their own version of the code and then changes, and they can deploy sequentially by using the integration server and the pipelines. So if you look at that, the QA database have 1.6 version, wherein the production pre-prod has 1.5, wherein the production database has 1.4. If I refresh this database and want to build a new QA2 database, what could be the version of it? 1.4. And then after 4, it has to be 5 and 6 also need to be pushed to the production. If they want to do a real testing on QA database, what it looks like. So in general cases, we do the same thing. So they're ready with 1.6 release to production. What they ask is refresh the database. We'll refresh and give it to them. Then they have to apply that 1.5 and 1.56 to the QA database as well, and apply that, test it, and then push that 1.6 to pre-prod. So they ideally need this database should be created and refreshed with this QA database, but it lost change 1.6, and you have to reapply, then ensure everything runs successfully, and then push that, and then push that. Assume they're asked from a clean state rather than building it from the production or something. So this is how it looks like. My previous job, like creating my database with my bunch of scripts, is clean database, a fresh database, and then my downstream job in the Jenkins deploy to whether what DB version I have to deploy, and then it takes all the scripts from the and then start applying that files on the database, and then creation of database. But in larger databases, we talk about the PeopleSoft or EBS or other things, this is not at all feasible doing that changes that easily. And then if you want to have a reference data and all, you just take your backups and apply that to the database. So specified what database, whether that sample data takes my latest backup, which I already tagged, and then put that into my latest database. So the structures have been deployed, the sample data, but database tools for a source control in the database structure. So apart from the Flyway, Liquibase, Datical, Redgate, or any other tools, is there any other native database tools in source tool and the database structures and the data? For Oracle, it is there. Oracle 11G edition based redefinition feature for PL/SQL procedures, triggers, and functions. You can use that within the database. And since 8i, there is a DBMS _ workspace manager to source control your table and its data as well. So DBMS _ WM workspace helpful if you want to use a source control within the database. You can use for Oracles, but I may not be knowing, I may not understand more, but the rest of the databases I've checked already, but none of them have this kind of feature in the data within the database itself. Okay. However, it represented a different problem for Oracle and another process for different databases, which may deviate the DevOps deployment, because we want to automate it. We want to automate for Oracle like this and different database something else. It's again a manual process, or the process will be deviated. So it's up to your policies. And so I've tried to look at a quick example for a Liquibase, which is quite popular tool for the refactoring. The Flybase is, in fact, Liquibase is an enterprise level thing which can support multi-user environment and that thing. So we have used that. Liquibase is an open source database independent library for tracking and managing applying database changes, which is an XML proprietary. If I say XML proprietary, I can easily convert this XML file to any database. That means from Oracle to Postgres, Postgres to Oracle, MySQL to Oracle, something like that. That means all my changes, I'll keep them in an XML format rather than create table or alter table format. So that's in like Liquibase converts them to the proprietary database format and apply the changes. So this will help you from cross database platform also for Liquibase. Liquibase execute changes based on this XML, handle revisions of database structures and data. So what Liquibase gives us these structural changes, columns, tables, data quality, lookup tables, constraint sequences also can be source control, integrities, transformations, insert, update, delete, architectural, that indexes can be done. So why Liquibase is basically we choose consistent database changes, manage database at different states, keep a history of changes in a change log, automatic rollback support, ability of automation, effectively managing variable changes, less human interactions for us. This is how your XML file look like. It says create table, the table name, what is columns, etc., etc. This is a use this XML file in Oracle. If I want to use the same XML file in Postgres also, it is easy. So this is an XML format. So it can be, you just add one more column here. It will take that as another change log. So this is how you can run in a command line. What driver I have to use, like, or anything, what is the change log location, the database name and password, generate change log, which takes and reverse engineer my whole database and then generate a log for that. When it changes, new alter statements, etc., created new things, you can do, you say might do a latest file, latest changes appended in this changelog.xml. It will migrate that data to the it will migrate the structures to the new to the database, to the new point of. So there is also you can keep them all the Liquibase bucket. So Liquibase Git Perl script can give you for us. We can source control all them in our Git bucket and then just ask what is the, so that it calls this Perl script actually calls internally and then run my change sets as to, rather than main files, all files in our any one of the server, we maintain that in GitHub, take it from there and run our changes, whatever the change set XML file contains. Some of the references, and this is a really good book to understand how to do that. Martin Flower have all of that, and these are all the websites that have referred to understand all this, and then we implemented all the stuff. Thanks for joining. Any questions?
Hi, Suresh. Looks like we have no questions up to this point, but I can redirect to you any questions that the people had afterwards, and I will be monitoring the messages and comments also in the Oracle Mania channel.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Suresh. It was a very good presentation, and I think so this will help a lot of people to understand how to use DevOps for databases.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you all.